The private room at Riviere, booked in advance, was now filled with guests. My sister Sophia sat at the head of the table, as if she were reigning on a queen's throne. The smile on her face glowed even more under the soft shimmer of purple and golden lights. She was executing her brand presentation, and at that moment all eyes were on her. Soon this moment would be featured in local magazines, and everyone would see just how famous she had become. Just then, my mother, Katerina, stood up. She tapped her fork against her crystal champagne glass, and the room suddenly fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Then she raised her glass and exclaimed with excitement, "To Sophia!" Her words filled the room. "To the bravest member of our family, the one who never fears chasing her greatest dreams." The guests responded with applause. I joined in, clapping my hands, but each clap felt automatic, mechanical. As everyone lifted their glasses to their lips, a waiter entered the room. But strangely, he didn't approach my father, mother, or sister. The heavy leather folder was pushed straight toward me. The folder resting on the table seemed to say, "Now everything will change." I opened it. Before my eyes was a figure, $3,450. I was stunned. This was no ordinary bill. It was the formal presentation of a decision that had already been made. My mother leaned forward. The sharp, heavy aroma of expensive red wine, aged in old oak barrels, hit my face from her breath. "A teacher's salary doesn't change, dear," she whispered, placing her hand on my shoulder. "Support your sister. That's all you can do." I first looked at the hand on my shoulder. Then I looked back at the folder. I said nothing. I quietly closed it, kept my fingers on the leather, and slid it across to the other side of the table, until it hit my mother's delicate wine glass stem with a sharp clink. Tonight, I want to see who really belongs in our circle. A moment of silence fell over the restaurant. My mother's gaze was fixed on the folder beside the wine glass. Her expression didn't change. Shock had frozen her like stone in an instant. Sophia's mouth hung slightly open. Her eyes darted nervously across the tables, checking who had witnessed everything. The guests, small investors, a few local bloggers, friends of friends, shifted uneasily in their seats. Some averted their eyes, while others' eyes widened in fear. I stood up. My body felt strangely light, as if my feet were pressing against empty air instead of the floor. First, I looked at Sophia, then I turned toward my mother. "I think a brand should pay for its own presentation," I said in a clear, calm voice, sharp enough to reach every corner of the room. I expected no response. Without looking back, I started toward the exit. Behind me, I heard the scrape of a chair and my mother's whisper, "Linda, sit." I passed the reception desk and the coat area and stepped outside. The air was cold. The wind hit my face with a harsh force. Yet I felt incredibly light. My fiancé, Max, followed quietly. He opened the car door with calm precision, his jaw set in a firm line. The engine roared to life, and the car began to move. On the way home, the car was silent. I gazed out the window at the city's streetlights. I expected a surge of guilt, the panic, the urge to apologize, the need to fix everything again, but none of it came. Instead, there was a strange calm, cold, yet clear. I looked at my hands. They rested on my knees. They were not trembling. For many years, I had always been the one to solve problems, the one who paid the bills so that everyone else could feel at ease. But tonight, I had returned the bill, and the world hadn't fallen apart. The sky hadn't come crashing down on me. I was simply sitting in the car, going home. My wallet was still closed. Max leaned over and took my hand. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. "It's like I just left work." He nodded. "Good. It was long overdue." We arrived at our yard. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the apartment. I turned on the lights outside, and everything lit up. The surroundings looked calm. safe. For years, I had convinced myself that I was strong, that I could fix things, that I was the responsible one who could keep the family together when everything fell apart. But as I took off my coat in the hallway, I realized it was a story I had told myself just to survive. For 10 years, I had treated my family like a malfunctioning slot machine. I kept dropping coins, believing that one day, love and approval would inevitably pay out like a jackpot. The coins I had dropped came back to me one by one. The $3,000 I gave my father when he hit his midlife crisis and bought a sports car he couldn't afford as his therapy. The deposit I paid for Sophia's first apartment in the city because she had no credit history. Countless urgent loans I had given them. In reality, all of it was the result of their weak planning. Every time I paid, I told myself, this is the last coin. From now on, everyone will treat me with respect. Sometimes it was enough to keep me supporting them and rolling up my sleeves again, especially when my mother said, "What would we do without you, Linda?" But tonight, looking at the restaurant bill, I realized the game was rigged. The machine wasn't broken. It was designed to take, not to pay out. The jackpot I had been waiting for would never come. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it. My hands were steady. I no longer expected a victory. I had simply run out of coins. I walked into the bedroom. The apartment's silence felt heavy, tense. My phone lay on the nightstand, vibrating. I looked at it for a moment. Its screen lit up the dark room with spasmodic flashes. I picked it up. A few messages had piled up. "Sophia, are you crazy? You humiliated me in front of the investors. Do you even know how bad that looked? Dad, your mother's crying in the car. Linda, why did you do this?" My mother had left a voice message. I didn't listen to it, but the transcription was clear enough. "I don't know who you think you are, but you need to fix this now." I scrolled through the messages and read them, but no one asked why I was doing this, how I was feeling. It was clear they weren't worried about me. They were worried about a disruption in the supply chain. They were angry because the Linda they treated like an ATM was no longer accepting cards. It was an obvious attack, a move meant to push me back into the apologetic, bowing state I had been in. But as I read words like selfish, dramatic, destructive, the shame I had known for years didn't rise. In its place was a harsher, colder feeling. I felt like a scientist standing behind a microscope. I was observing what was in front of me from the outside. This was not love, not even family. This was a long, broken, corrupted mechanism. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen fell across my face in the dark room. My fingers rested on the keyboard, but I didn't respond. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened a blank spreadsheet. I cracked my knuckles and began to type. This was no longer an emotional reaction. This was a professional audit. I stared at the empty sheet, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Date, item, cost. I started with the simple things. Rent for Sophia's studio apartment 6 years ago. Check number 45. $1,200. Bail money for my father's drunk driving offense. $5,000. Plane tickets for my mother's mental health trip within Arizona. $800. The numbers grew quickly, a black ink column telling the story of my financial stagnation. But as I wrote, I realized that the monetary debt was only half the story. I opened a new column and labeled it Dream Ledger. This was for expenses without receipts, but whose value was equal to everything. The night I skipped my own anniversary dinner because Sophia had a panic attack during her casting interview. Cost, a ruined memory. The weekend I spent cleaning my father's garage because he couldn't do it alone, only to find him inside watching football. Cost, 2 days of my life. The moment my mother said to me, "Your rise is beautiful, but," and then spent 40 minutes talking about Sophia's new hairstyle. Cost, my self-respect. I wrote until my fingers ached. Every swallowed apology, every forced boundary, every driver, therapist, and emotional punchbag moment. I listed them all. I produced a grief balance sheet, and the total stunned me. I wasn't just in the red, I was completely bankrupt. Max was beside me, looking at his phone. "Hey," he said, his voice tense. "Look at this." He held the phone screen toward me. There was a photo of the receipt from the restaurant. He scrolled down, past the steak and wine. A line written in small letters caught my eye. "Private room deposit, held for future event, $1,500. I froze. No words came out. "What is this?" "I don't know," he said, his voice uncertain. "But the date is set for next month." I grabbed my phone and called the restaurant. Even at this late hour, the manager answered. I spoke with the voice that sounded like my mother's assistant. "Hello, I'm calling to confirm the deposit details on tonight's Henderson receipt. We just want to check the date for the anniversary celebration." The manager touched the keyboard, his voice calm but precise. "Yes, ma'am. The Tuscany room was booked on the 15th for Robert and Katerina's 30th anniversary celebration. The $1,500 deposit secures the space." I hung up the phone. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the device. The 30th anniversary celebration, the one my mother had told me was canceled. They had even said they couldn't afford it this year, but they hadn't canceled it. They were booking it. And all of this was happening using my money. The funds I was supposed to set aside for Sophia's dinner were being spent to organize a celebration I wasn't even invited to. I looked at Max. They hadn't asked permission to come. They had simply announced it. Sunday afternoon, a message arrived from my father. "We're downstairs. Open the door. We need to settle this." I looked at Max. He was standing by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, alert, ready for battle. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. "No," I said. "Stay in the bedroom. I have to do this myself." They needed to see that my power didn't come from anyone else. This was my own strength. Finally, I let them in. When I opened the door, the hallway seemed smaller than usual. My father entered first, heavy and disappointed. Behind him came my mother and Sophia. Sophia stayed at the very back, wearing a black headscarf, probably to hide her eyes, swollen from performative crying. They didn't take off their coats. They didn't greet me. They walked straight into my living room. Everyone sat down. I sat in the armchair facing the sofa. I placed the folder I had prepared on the coffee table between us. Inside were spreadsheets, bank accounts, and more. "Biz sıfırlayacak. Anam başladı. Sesi sık ve nezaretliydi. Sen yolunu itirmişsin Sofia. Çarşamba akşamı rüsvayçılık idi. Bacını utandırdın," dedi. "You humiliated your father, and you created a scene people are still talking about." "I've never been this embarrassed," my sister added, her voice trembling at just the right moment. "My investors were asking if we had financial problems at home. Do you know how hard it is to find funding when your own sister presents you as a charity case?" "We are ready to move past this," my father intervened, raising his hand to silence Sophia. He looked at me with a familiar mix of sternness and mercy. "We know you're stressed. Maybe you're jealous of Sophia's success. Maybe you feel left behind. We forgive you for that, but you need to apologize. You have to pay the bill you abandoned and make this right." I looked carefully at each of their faces. For years, this kind of trial would have terrified me. I would have cried, begged for understanding, worked frantically to prove I wasn't a bad person. But today, there was no fear. Instead, there was the cold detachment of an auditor reviewing the books of a failed company. In this moment, they weren't my family. They were bad investments trying for another round of capital. "Are you done talking?" I asked. "We'll be done when you apologize," my mother shouted. I didn't apologize. I didn't shout. I simply pressed my finger onto the manila folder. "I'm not here to apologize," I said. "I'm here to audit the accounts." The air in the room shifted instantly. They felt it, as if control had slipped from their hands. They realized I wasn't following the script they had written. They had thought they came to discipline a rebellious child, but instead, sitting before them was someone demanding accountability. I opened the folder. I picked up the enlarged receipt. I didn't look at them. I looked at the numbers. First item, I read aloud, my voice flat and even. Dry-aged ribeye, medium, $85. Second item, bottle of Veuve Clicquot, $400. Third item, truffle fries, $18. "Linda, stop this," my mother said, her voice trembling. "This isn't becoming of you." I didn't stop. I moved my finger down to the line circled in red ink. "Fourth item," I continued, looking directly at her eyes. "Private room deposit, held for future event, $1,500. I paused, letting my words hang in the air like smoke. "I called the restaurant, Mother. The reservation is confirmed. Next month, the Tuscany room for your 30th anniversary celebration. You told me it had been canceled because you were too poor to celebrate." The color drained from my mother's face. My father shifted uneasily, suddenly intrigued by the pattern on the rug. Sophia stopped her fake crying and looked at our parents, bewildered. "You said you weren't celebrating," I said. "We didn't want to burden you," my mother stammered, her gaze flicking between me and Sophia. "We knew money stressed you out, Linda. We didn't want you to feel forced to buy gifts." "Forced," I said with a short, dry laugh. "You said I wouldn't feel forced, yet you simply used my credit card to book the venue?" Then I picked up the second stack of papers, the spreadsheet, the dream ledger. I opened it on the table, 5 pages, each written in a single line. "This," I said, touching the columns with my finger, "is the audit of the last 5 years. Sophia's rent in 2020, father's attorney fees, mother's mental health trips, my phone bills since I was 22, the streaming services you all used but made me pay for." I looked at my father. "You called me petty. You said I was disrupting family dynamics." I touched the bottom of the last page, the total sum. $42,350. This is the amount of money I've paid to this family over the past 5 years. This is the down payment for a house. This is a wedding ceremony. This is my lost future subsidizing your lifestyle. My father's face went bright red. "We raised you. You owe us." "I owe you nothing." My voice didn't rise, but the sharpness in my words cut through his arrogance like a knife. Tonight I realized something. I have never been just a daughter for you. I have never been. I am a venture capitalist. I am the silent partner you turn to when you need saving, but refuse to provide capital. I stood up. I towered over them, sitting in their awkward furniture. "And I've decided this is a bad investment. I am withdrawing my capital." I gestured to the door. "Leave." "Linda," my mother pleaded, rising to try to grab my hand. "Let's just talk. We can arrange a payment plan." I pulled my hand away as if her touch burned me. "There is no payment plan," I said. "The account is closed. Leave my house and leave your keys on the table. If you try to use it again, I will change the locks. If you pressure me, I will take this ledger to small claims court. I no longer buy your love." They looked at me, really looked, and they understood that the bank was closed. No more credit. Slowly, my father stood up, silently. He placed his key on the coffee table, next to the symbol of his greed. He didn't look back. One by one, they left the room. As the door closed behind them, the sound echoed through my bones, filled with finality and irreversibility. These days passed quietly. No one was pleading with me over any payment. No one was exploiting my humaneness. I was no longer the obedient girl I used to be. One morning, I opened my banking app. The numbers were higher than I had ever seen. The monthly drains, phone bills, streaming services, the emergency loans that never came back, had stopped. The $42,000 I would have poured out over the next 5 years stayed right here. I turned to Max, who was making coffee in the kitchen. "Order it," I said. "We're going to Cyprus, and for the first time in my life, my resources were funding my own dreams, not someone else's. I sat at my table and opened my laptop one last time. I scanned the spreadsheet, the dream ledger. It was no longer a source of anger. It was just data, a historical record of failed business relationships and every expense I had paid over the years. I moved the file to the archive folder and closed it. The screen went dark, and I saw the silhouette of my own reflection. Tired, yes, but free. In that moment, I realized that freedom had come at a high cost. I had lost my mother, my father, my sister. I had lost the illusion of a safety net. But as I looked around my quiet, peaceful living room, knowing no one was coming to violate my sanctuary, I understood that the price of staying any other way would have been even higher. The account was closed, the balance was zero, and I was finally in the black, free, fully in control of myself. If you've ever felt like you were treated as an ATM for strangers or lent your calm like a debt, share this story. You are not a bank. You are your own value. Subscribe for more stories.